But I just feel, because it does take such energy and such commitment, that the baton should be passed to somebody else in roughly 3.5 years' time. Who that is, that will be a matter for the States in 3.5 years' time.
Welcome to the Bailiwick Express podcast. My name is Matthew Leach. I'll be joined each week by a guest for a series of podcasts. Each will shine a light on topics from across the bailiwick. The format will change week to week. We'll have debates, reviews, hot seat interviews and special guests. So stick with us as we offer some insight on some of the most important issues we in the bailiwick face. Guernsey's Chief Minister, in a public interview recently, said he would be unlikely to run for the position again, and that one term as President of PNR is probably enough. With more than 3 years left to go as the top politician in the States, we wanted to sit down with him and ask him why he made this statement and how it bodes for the rest of his term. In the process, Deputy Peter Ferbrache spoke on rumours, allegations, his avoidance of social media, and when we can expect PNR to buy a new ferry. But my first question focused on how the role of a deputy has changed for Deputy Ferbrache since he was first elected as a sitting deputy in 1994. So this time round I'm going to assume that it's been very different.
Completely different.
And what has changed for you? What has been different?
Well, there are less people, but it takes up more time. When I was in the States last time, I think there were 57 people, including deputies, concierges, and deuxième representatives. Now, of course, there are just deputies and the 2 ordinary representatives. Takes more time. There are more, if I can say that, full-time stroke professional deputies than there were 20 odd years ago. The world is more complicated, I accept that. Guernsey is more in the focus than it ever was, the bailiwick of Guernsey. It's more international than it was even 20 odd years ago, albeit we had lots of international obligations, etc. even then. But it's more international, and of course, with technology, internet, etc., the world is quicker. You know, there's no writing a letter and it takes 2 or 3 days to get a response. It's an internet communication, a WhatsApp or an email goes, and it's back to you within 2 minutes. We're left on our own more. We've got more independence. We're a crown dependency. We're not an independent sovereign state, but we make our own laws. We've got our own judicial system. We enter into international obligations, admittedly via the UK, but our rights are respected, albeit we've got to be vigilant that our rights are respected. But we've also got to look after ourselves more. We can't assume that the UK, as we perhaps did 30 years ago, will be there as a safety net.
Absolutely. I wanted to pick up on one of your points there about technology, I suppose, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, as a journalist, I get a small bit of grief from time to time, and when I do, rattles around my head for a day, but I can't imagine what you go through. It must be completely different. I mean, how do you deal with, I guess, the court of public opinion?
Well, I think everybody's different. I've always had broad shoulders because, A, from the background I come from, and B, the fact I've been a litigation lawyer since I was 21. And I was a combative litigation lawyer. If I'd march towards the bullets rather than walk away from them. But it's still occasionally, you go back. I mean, I was out last Saturday, I got back. Some person, all of a sudden, I'd never heard of this person before. I put my phone on, which I'd switched off, and there was a message, you're terrible, you've done this, you've done that, you've done the other. I don't suppose you'll respond to me. Well, I did respond to that person, and I said, why don't you meet up? And then, of course, as often happens in those circumstances, the person goes silent. Because I'm quite happy to sit down and talk to somebody. We may well not agree at the end of that 10 minutes, hour, whatever long we're there, but at least the person can see I'm genuine in my views, and I would hope they would be genuine in theirs. But there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there, and that's the unfortunate bit.
Because you keep off social media, really.
I do, yeah.
But people can still contact you.
Of course they can. My email is available, my private email, my state's email, my mobile phone, and for some reason Shaw's missed my landline off the new directory. I think they did last time. I don't know why, because I didn't ask them to go ex-directory, but people can get hold of you. People get hold of you, very easily get hold of you. And I've got a friend that sends me tweets, sends me extracts from tweets or tweets about me. So, yeah, but the reason I haven't materially gone on Facebook, technically I'm on it, but I don't really participate, and I'm not on Twitter at all, is it would just drag you in. You would be spending hours a day dealing with that, and I don't want to do that. I don't think it's necessary because we are contactable in Guernsey. You know, it's not as though we're in an MP that somebody can only see once a blue moon. A Guernsey deputy is very contactable.
And I guess these, I mean, I'm not going to dwell on any allegations or rumours in this conversation that came up in the past, but this snowballing into discussions online and stuff like this, is this part of the reason that I suppose you alluded to in that BBC interview that you will not stand for the same position again, or you could not stand for the same position?
Well, no,
again?
I don't think it's that so much. I mean, I've given really good notice because it's another 3 years and 5 months before we've got an election, and I hope to be fit and able to continue to do this job for that period of time. But I just feel, because it does take such energy and such commitment, that the baton should be passed to somebody else in roughly 3.5 years' time. Who that is, that will be a matter for the States in 3.5 years' time. And also I've got to have the fact I'm, you know, one of the older members of the States Assembly, and we're all mortal, and I'm going to want to do something else with my life post being a States member. I mean, I may stand as a States member in 3.5 years' time, but if I am elected, I would want to be sort of a backbencher type.
Okay, I appreciate you mentioning that. You know, of course, you've got three-ish years left, or however long it is now.
Yeah.
And to make this, how does this sentiment kind of bode for the next 3 years? Can we be, confident?
I want to get things done, and it does frustrate me. And it's not his fault; it's the system, and we're trying to change the system. That it takes a long time. I mean, for example, this afternoon to come here, I parked at the North Beach. I could have tried just opposite, but I parked at the North Beach. And I can see it's a great asset for town, but couldn't we do something better with that site? You know, it's practical things like that. We still have to have car parking, but could we move it underground? Could we move it somewhere else? Could we turn that into a park of some kind? You know, I don't know, all kinds of ideas. The Seafront Enhancement Group hopefully will take those kind of ideas forward in early course, but it's just something like that. It's getting something practical done, not to leave a legacy, not to leave a monument, but to actually do things for the betterment of the bailiwick.
I mean, why did you? Because I remember in your video for when you first went for election, you said you wanted to cut the bureaucracy and the red tape. Do you think within this term there will have been steps made to avoid that?
I think we've done it already. I mean, I'm not saying it because I see them nearly every day, but the four other members of Policy and Resources, and we've all come from different outlooks. I mean, you've got Mark Kelly, who's leader of the Guernsey Party. You've got Dave Mahoney, who's independent but a business type, in trust. You've got Heidi Salisbury, who's also a very clever, intelligent politician with great experience. And you've got John Latoc, again, former Chief Minister, External Relations Minister. And I think we've got things done already, and I think we'll get a fair bit more done if we're permitted, because ultimately it's a matter for the Assembly, in the next 3 and a bit years. I really do think we'll do a lot of things. I don't think we'll achieve all the things we want to achieve, because you never do.
I mean, why did you go for the role in the first place?
Chief Minister?
For Chief Minister, and are you still happy that you did?
Yeah, I'm still happy I did. I just felt that, and no disrespect to anybody who's previously held the office, that I had I was a local man. Now, I don't let me read because my children are half English, their mother's English, it's nothing to do with that. I've lived in England, I've worked in England, I support England football and cricket teams, sometimes to my chagrin, but you know what I mean. It's my second place behind Guernsey, but I'm a Guernseyman of a certain age and a certain experience who's benefited, because I was born 6 years after the occupation, and my generation, when I went to law school, all paid for by the States. Every opportunity, when I wanted to come back to Guernsey, and also when I became an English barrister, there were opportunities there that wouldn't exist for people like me now, or be very difficult. And when I decided to come back to Guernsey, there were plenty of places, well, not plenty because there weren't that many firms, but there were a number of firms that offered me a job. It's much more difficult for people now, and I want the 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024 Peter Ferbraches, if you call it that, to have that opportunity that I had. And it's more difficult for them now. I mean, if you've got an affluent mum and dad, you can go to university, you're not going to have a university debt, are you? Because your mum and dad are going to pay for it. If you're not in that circumstance, you're going to have a university debt. You're going to have a debt that you're going to have to meet. I never had that. I left, when I qualified as a barrister, I could start, going out with any debt. I incurred some in my first years, because you do. But it wasn't insurmountable debt. I could pay it back. That's a dark cloud hanging over people. I don't think there's much we can do about it, but I just want to try and improve and give everybody the best opportunity that they can.
It's interesting you mentioned legacy within that then, and all the work yet to be done, because that was going to be one of my last questions for this, but we'll come back to COVID anyway, because I think it's important. But you mean your first term in office has kind of been shadowed? It's all been about COVID, really. I mean,
It has. Well, not all, but a lot. You're right. When I became President of Policy and Resources, / Chief Minister in just about early second half of October 2020, COVID was still with us. And I can remember being at home on the Friday the 22nd of January of 2021 and getting a call from a senior civil servant to say the strong advice is that we should be locking down. And we had to act instantly because there was a dance festival at Beausejour which had one day to run. So there are going to be hundreds of children and parents going the next day. So we had to, and we did, we moved very quickly. And early morning, I mean, people knew by early morning that Guernsey was going to be locked down. It was formally locked down about midday, I think, something like that, perhaps anyway, around midday. Took 2 months to come out of that, and we were recovering stage by stage. Then, of course, we got Omicron, which sort of raised its ugly head in late November, came to Guernsey in early December. So it's been, and it's sucked up so many resources. I mean, you look at Dr. Brink and her team, working 16 hours a day for the last 18, 20 months, hardly a day off in all that period of time. Senior civil servants having to do other jobs in addition to their jobs. They've worked their socks off over the last 20 months or so. They don't get the credit for it. We do occasionally say, well done, but they don't get the real credit for it. People, lazy civil servants sitting around doing nothing. Just the opposite. And it's pressured because people don't remember, and it's human nature, we're all the same. People don't remember the good things, they only remember the things that go wrong. Let us just say one day they went to Beausejour and it was closed because, I'm talking about the vaccination centre, because we didn't have enough vaccine or there weren't enough people there. People get castigated for that. The civil servants make sure that doesn't happen.
I guess my question is, do you feel like you will be defined by this first year, or do you hope that the next 3 years of your service or your tenure as Chief Minister you'll be defined by something else?
Well, I think people will be entitled to look back for the whole 4.5 years, and say the first 16, 17 months they did this, then this occurred and that occurred. I mean, it wasn't just COVID. We had Brexit as well, because Brexit came about, and that we're a tiny place. We're not an independent state, but we're almost independent in lots of ways. We've got a very small external relations team in Guernsey. The work they do is phenomenal. I didn't realise that till I became Chief Minister. Absolutely phenomenal. That's not going to stop because, of course, there are trade agreements. There's still the French to deal with. There's all kinds of things and that's not going to stop. I mean, hopefully the French might calm down a bit, but there's always going to be something, and that's taken a lot of work for people. And I mean, John O'Tock's done that job very well, but he was ill for a few months, if you remember last year. And that's when I realised how much work he and his team did because I had to step in. And there's the economy. The economy has obviously suffered as a result, as everywhere's economy suffered as a result of COVID. It's recovering, but we've got a structural position that we haven't invested enough money in the infrastructure, and that's not a criticism of anybody, by the way. We haven't invested enough money in the infrastructure in the last X number of years. We've now got to do it. It's a bit like if you don't repair your car, eventually it will cease to work. Some of our bits will cease to work. And also, even though I'm a veteran years, you want life to be better for people than it is today. And today it's better than it was, I'm talking figuratively rather than literally, because people have good and bad days. But generally it's better than it was. I look back to my childhood, and we had lots of freedom, etc. But people were generally in Guernsey, with limited exceptions being perhaps 20% of the population, they were poor. I don't mean they were poor like in Africa, but they were poor. It was outside toilets, and now I get my leg pulled for that. Second-hand clothes. Your parents just about managed to scrape by every week, and that was the majority of people in Guernsey, not just the Ferbrache family. Well, we're better off than that now, by and large. There are still some people, of course, who are in need of help, and there always will be. But generally, people have a higher standard of living. I want that to improve.
And you mentioned infrastructure in your conversation there. Of course, I'll be remiss if I didn't talk about the ferry today. I know,
yes, that's fair enough.
I just was going to ask you a couple of questions.
Of course, absolutely.
That's all right with you. I mean, I guess PNR confirmed yesterday at a scrutiny meeting.
Yeah. We'd said it before. In an interview to one of your colleagues, I don't mean a Bailiwick Express colleague.
Yeah, okay.
I'd mentioned it before Christmas. I think it came out in early January.
There was, I guess, an allusion to it in a way. I mean, how long has this idea been developing of buying a ferry?
A fair time. I can't say 8 or 10 months or a year because I just can't remember, but a fair time.
Is it, and has it been a conversation with Jersey, or is this Guernsey?
I think we don't want to criticise Jersey, but there've been conversation, not with me personally, but with civil servants, and it hasn't developed as quickly as we would like. Now, I don't want to take that as a criticism of Jersey. They've got different thoughts, different considerations. So we thought we've got to secure the interests of the Bailiwick of Guernsey. Now, there still isn't done. It could well be done by the end of January, as I say. And what we're talking about by the end of January is a contract with Condor, not necessarily the purchase of the vessel being by the 31st of January, but hopefully that would be relatively shortly thereafter, because the funding's got to be agreed, and that's going to be looked at in the next 10 to 12 days. So I think January is still a realistic estimate, but if not, it won't be a big slippage. And of course, till you've got a commercial contract actually signed, you can't say it's 100% sure, but there's a better than even chance it'll go through. And the idea is a conventional ferry, which would add support to the cluster of ships that Condor has, which would give more security and an enhanced service to the island.
But one point that I guess I wanted to raise was that I remember before Bailiwick Express, we covered a report in 2015 about the Condor Liberation that said that that the ferry services don't make any money, and especially the Guernsey routes make no money, actually lose money. And is this another Aurigny? Is this funding a service?
No. But I mean, even then, I'll come back to Aurigny in a moment if I
yeah, for
but
sure.
No, I mean it is no. You're right about passenger services. Certainly for the last 2 years, they've made miles less than break even, haven't they?
Supported by freight.
Freight is the thing. You need a composite carrier to bring your freight and to bring your passengers, because I doubt that it would be attractive to a sensible, consistent sea provider to just service our passenger routes. You know, you've got to do the two. It's got to be commercial. They've got to look, whether it's Condor or any other company, in any other business, they've got to look to be able to make a profit over a period of time, because that's how the world of business works. Now, as to Aurigny, I wasn't in the States when I think 2002 or whenever it was when Aurigny was purchased. I don't know how much foresight those people thought they had, but they had great foresight. It was an excellent decision, well made by the States of Guernsey all those years ago. Now, I may have got the figures wrong, but I think Aurigny, with either capitalisation or subsidies, or call it whatever you will, we're not allowed to call them subsidies, it's something like 90 to 96 million over the lifetime of the state's ownership of Aurigny, because it's very few years that it's made a profit and hasn't made one for a long time. Now, that's public money. It's a heck of a lot of public money, but it's still a good investment for the island. Now, I cannot tell you, because I've not been involved for the last 19 years, 20 years, that every penny has been well spent. I'm not able to say that. So therefore I don't want to be discursive when I say, oh, well, so what? Because what I'm saying is that that's a good thing for Guernsey. When I went over, I had the great honour of going over to the Cenotaph to lay the wreath for the Bailiwick of Guernsey in November. And I was talking to my colleague from the Isle of Man. In fact, it was the Speaker of the Isle of Man rather than the Chief Minister, because the Chief Minister was engaged in doing something in the Isle of Man. He'd had to fly down at 8 o'clock on a particular evening with EasyJet, because that was their only link to London. So that was their service to London. Admittedly, they're up there, so they've got Manchester and Liverpool, etc., etc. But as a finance centre or quasi-finance centre, one of the important places in the world is London.
Yes.
We have got, in normal times, 5 or 6 daily links to Gatwick. A fantastic service. But we've got to pay for it. Now, whether that in due course that should be 3 or 4 or 2 or 3, I don't know. That will be rationalised in due course, or it may stay at 6 or whatever. But at least the financial world can see we've got a link, and a pretty solid link, with London, and people can go backwards and forwards. Now, I suppose it could always be better, but it's pretty good for an island of 63,000 people and a bailiwick of 65,000.
And do you believe in their promise or their aim of breaking even?
I believe that's their intent. I think they've got an excellent chairman. He's only been in situ a year or 2, and of course he's been hampered by COVID, and a very good new, and again only been around for a relatively short period of time, new chief executive, who every States member who's dealt with him is very impressed, and he's not just a talker. I think he'll be a doer. It'll be a bit, I would like to guarantee they will break even or make a profit. I hope they do, but I do think they'll be very well run.
I want to bring it back round to politics,
Yep.
to the position you're in, and I want to very briefly talk about the kind of state of politics at the moment in Guernsey.
Yep.
And there have been things bandied around recently, and I know in that conversation with the BBC you said, hold no great respect for Gavin St Pierre, and that I don't want to get into the weeds here, but there's clearly a divide in the States.
Yep.
Is this something you've experienced before, and do you think it's something the public want?
I don't think it's anything the public want, because it's anything I want. I don't think the public want to see people being harmonious in a small community like ours. It's not like England, where the Labour Party says something and the Conservative Party says something else. We've never had that kind of politics. We've got consensus politics. People have had different views, of course they do, on all range of issues. But I don't think they want it. I don't like it. I was criticised, I think, in the last term, because we were then not in the opposition, but we were perhaps in the minority. It must be you that's being discursive. I think this term has shown that isn't the case. But I am not the kind of individual, because it's not my nature, and I've been far more biting my tongue than I've ever done in my life, that's just going to let those kind of things pass me by. So it's a bit like, I remember Lord Denning, who was a very famous judge, quoted I think it was a French, some French poet or something, saying, "This animal is wicked. When I kick him, he kicks me back." And that's the kind of thought that I don't want to be kicked, and I'd much rather we dealt with things. We have arguments. Some people might be in favour of assisted dying, some people aren't in favour of assisted dying. Some people think GST is the right way to go forward, other people don't. That's a fair enough view. People are entitled to take whatever stand they want in relation to that and argue their case appropriately. And certainly, if I take a particular view on something and somebody else takes a different view, I'm not going to fall out with them if they're successful and I'm not. That's just the way it is. It's the personalisation of it that is unfortunate.
And do you think, I guess, with the most recent development of future Guernsey, that we're getting a more binary government? Is there a right or left-leaning kind of situation, or is it more subtle than that?
I think it is more subtle than that, because, just for example, the very able Vice President, Deputy Salisbury, who's done so much good work, both previously and in this term, when we had their thing about the Catholic schools, do you remember the debate about the Catholic schools? She decided to abstain on that, which I fully respect her view. I voted in favour of effectively retaining the ability of the Catholic schools to choose their own senior people. So that's the kind of civilised debate and difference of opinion you can have without falling out with somebody.
Would it be fair to say that, this division has stemmed from the very close election for PNR president that did happen? And
I don't think it was that close. It was 23-17. I think that's in a 40 man and woman thing, that's a pretty solid majority. Bear in mind, when Deputy St Pierre was elected 4 years previously, it was 20-19 with one messed paper or abstention, I can't remember which, on the fourth ballot. So I think it was reasonably clear. It wasn't 30-10, but it was clear enough. 6 votes out of 40, whatever that percentage that is. That's a pretty good majority, I would have thought.
Agreed, yeah, I take your point there. And I guess my point was saying that, the level of criticism aimed at you would have kind of be similar to the level of criticism that aimed at St Pierre at the time. Does it just come with the role?
I think it does. I think it comes with the role to a degree. I think it's been more personal because, I am Peter Ferbrache once described me, or more than once described me, as a shoot from the hip character. Perhaps Deputy St Pierre is more considered. I'm not drawing personalities in relation to that. I think I am considered, but I think occasionally I do, I do say things that are perhaps not as politically correct as they otherwise could be.
Fair enough. Well, I was going to move on next then I wanted to ask very quickly about the latest on our CEO, State CEO, Mark Bulgari. What is the latest there?
Mark is the interim CEO.
Yeah.
In a few months' time, March, April time, we will be advertising for a permanent CEO. Mark may well apply. We'll extend our net far and wide, and we will appoint the appropriate person for that job.
How has he taken to the role since?
I think he's done very well in the 3 or 4 months that he's been doing it. I think Mark, I knew him anyway from the fact I'd worked with him obviously the previous X number of months, and in his senior role as part of the senior leadership team. And I was very impressed with him because he was very much involved, amongst other things, with COVID. He was the sort of the main person for COVID, and as was Mr. Whitfield. But Mark was the one who tended to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And he's continued that degree of expertise and ability in the last 3 or 4 months he's been an interim chief executive.
A couple more pieces that I wanted to just get your take on while
Yeah.
we're sitting here together. I know in this role you would have interacted far more with the media than you would have in the past.
Oh,
Sure.
of course.
And
because, we're there, of course, absolutely.
And how have you found what do you make of local journalism in this? You mean been asking questions?
I think it's very difficult for local journalists because, again, just as we are easily approachable, so are they. If you write for the Daily Express or the Guardian, you're probably not going to be that contactable in the same way as you are in Guernsey. You see you down the street, see you in the supermarket, that kind of stuff. Not you, not Bailiwick Express. There is one journal that I think could be more balanced. I can mention it if you like.
Of course, if you
Guernsey
feel
Press, the Guernsey Press, because I think that they have columnists who all have roughly the same opinion. Now, I'm not saying they get rid of those columnists. I'm saying it should be more balanced. And I think what they should do, and I've invited them to do it, and I'm not sure with any degree of success, they could go to some of the newer deputies and say, Mr. Bloggs, Miss Smith, do you want to write a column? Most people may say I can't be bothered. Or not necessarily a column, the occasional article about, a particular matter in the States or a particular thing that they want to give their opinion about. Now, they may say, well, we've approached 26 deputies and they've all said no. If they say that, I'll believe them because they're not going to lie. But I'm not aware that they've done that.
Do you
So
think?
I think in a small jurisdiction, the government must be held to account. The last thing you want is a Russian type thing where it's all wonderful, you've all done a great job, because we don't do a great job all the time. We try, but we get things wrong. And the machinery of government, and I'm talking about the general thing, isn't always as efficient as it should be, and it needs to be looked at, etc., etc. So you certainly should be capable of being criticised, but it should be fair and objective criticism.
Do you think there has been unfair criticism?
A bit, but I don't want to be seen to be. I don't want to be seen to be saying that we've been criticised too much unfairly, because otherwise it would be saying one of the criticisms we have, P&R is trying to create this thing about only our view is right, and of course it isn't. I mean, other people have got views to put forward, and sometimes, I've sat down many times in my life as a lawyer and as a politician, and my other interests I've got in businesses, etc. And I've gone into a meeting thinking X, and I've listened to what people said, and I've come out thinking Y, because I've been persuaded. Often I haven't, and often I've persuaded them. But you've got to have an open mind, and sometimes, I can't remember the exact quote, but this is a quote from many, many years ago. Even a fool can say a sensible thing. So you've got to give people, within the bounds of reason. I mean, you don't want to sit there all day with somebody just whiches on and talks about something that's got nothing to do with what you're talking about. But you've got to give people the right to speak.
I mean, while we're on the moment of criticism there, I did want to ask about, have you seen the Private Eye article?
Yeah, I did. Somebody and of course that was nonsense, because Dr. Brink and I didn't go to the dinner. We were accused of going to the dinner. We never went. B, both she and I didn't go as a member of CCA. Paul Whitfield did a very good thing, because he's a rugby man, and he thought if we could get Warren Gatland to, get his rugby team to spend some of the time in Guernsey, it's great. It was a fantastic idea. Organised, I think, I can't remember the exact time now, I think it was noon, let's say noon, on this particular day. Will I come up just to, meet and greet? I'm the Chief Minister, welcome Mr. Gatland. Are you going to bring your rugby team here? That kind of thing. And there were other people there. We were all socially distanced. Dr. Brink was there. We all complied with every single rule. And what we didn't realise, and there's an argument about whether it was lunch or not, I don't think that's a bit of an arid argument now. All of a sudden somebody said, there's a few sandwiches at the back. So I had a couple of sandwiches, and so did lots of other people. We had a couple of sandwiches. Whether that's lunch or not, I don't know. That was it. But all rules were maintained.
Did you?
And you could think, oh, well, shall I? I'm not going to sue them. But shall I sue? Because I can remember I used to read Private Eye when I was at school, and they always had a fund because they were always getting sued by people. What was the chap? There was some chap who always sued them and got hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of damages. Goldsmith. Yeah. He used to sue them and get tons of damages. What's the point? But it's complete rubbish. It's just complete rubbish. But somebody sent it to them. There's no point trying to find out who sent it to them, and what's the point of that? And there's no point asking them for a correction, because it's just absolute blinking nonsense.
I mean, I guess the type of media you have in the UK is completely different from over here.
And they just say things. I mean, I can remember saying, I was watching the telly, this is 35 years ago, watching the telly, and I saw, it was something about Huey Green, I don't know what it was, I saw him say something. And a couple of private eyes later, I saw a quotation about Huey Green, and he'd said such and such on the programme, and we were critical of him, and in fact he'd said just the opposite. You know, so that's what you get. I mean, but I still like private eye, and I buy it occasionally.
I'm sure Ian Hislop will be very happy. I mean, we didn't want to talk about them, but with these moments in time where these, allegations and rumours and discussions came up, you must have found it difficult.
I did, of course I did. I found it difficult. I knew it weren't true, but I knew that it would, the dust is going to go up before it comes down. And what really, really, really annoyed me, there was a thing by a certain deputy about that my daughter had sent me a WhatsApp, or not to me, sent something else a WhatsApp, etc. And my daughter's got a family. She's involved in the Christie's business. She was away with one of her children at a particular something that the child needed in England, so she was missing her other child, etc., etc. She didn't need that at that time.
Do you think it was an irrelevant thing to bring up?
I thought it was an unnecessary thing to bring up, in my view. And if that person had really wanted to have a balanced view, why didn't they pick up the telephone and speak to me about it and say, I've seen this, that your daughter sent to her friends or whatever. What are you going to say? Never happened, instead it appeared in the media.
Okay. Well, we'll move on from that to the end. I know I wanted to finish off on discussing about COVID briefly, of course. I mean, I did want to ask about, the UK dropping its isolation limit to 5 days today.
We'll look at that. We've considered it. We've got when COVID was at its peak, I'm not saying it's not at its peak now, but there were times when we were meeting every day. The CCO would meet every day. And certainly Dr. Brink, the former chief executive, Mark DeGarry, Al Brouard, Heidi Salisbury, we would meet every day. We'd have a meeting every day at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, whatever it was, for a time. We now meet once a week, but we will meet more regularly if we need to. I hope we don't, frankly, because I hope we're coming, I hope, I'm not the expert, we're coming out of it. But we have discussed that, whether it should be 5 days instead of 6 and a bit days now, because if you realise, if you have your test first thing on the 7th day and you can go out that 7th day. So it's 6 and a bit days, really. But we'll listen to what Dr. Brink advises us and to the other evidence. If the evidence is that it's safe to do so, then I'll be very surprised if the CCA doesn't reduce it from 7 to 5 days. But that will be on the basis of the evidence and the advice we get.
And you meet on Tuesday next week, is that right?
Yeah. Tuesday at 12:30.
And so I guess you who seem to have been damned if you do, damned if you don't the entire time.
Yeah.
Are there any decisions that you are particularly, you 100% got right, and are there any decisions that actually maybe you got wrong?
Yeah, I think the 100% right one, I think it's an easy one. The 100% right one, the best one was, it's not the best one, but the necessary one, was closing down in January. Clearly that was the right decision, but that was an easy right decision because, getting them wrong, perhaps, I'm sure that was got wrong or, on reflection, could have done it better. I think perhaps explaining things to the public more readily. Because what I intended to do, and what we've done a bit, but it's been knocked askew a bit by COVID, is to have public meetings, drop-ins, etc. That's not been possible recently. Now, I'm not saying that all the drop-ins have been fantastically attended, albeit the last one when we were talking about the tax review was very well attended. And public meetings at the Coathills, that kind of stuff. Going out in the media, going to the radio, explaining yourself. I'm sure we could do more of that. Albeit you don't want to be doing it all the time because you've actually got to do the work as well.
Why is that not been the case?
I think COVID's part of it, and also we've been learning a lesson. I mean, people criticised us for not really going out to the public enough when we had the first debate about the tax review. Remember, that was a green paper. We changed it to effectively a green paper, and we changed our view in relation to that. No criticism, because I think our comms team, the civil servants, do a brilliant job. But perhaps we could have done it. Perhaps we, the politicians, could have done that better. That was because remember it was all about GST and all that kind of stuff, which is fair enough because GST will come up, will be at the debate in July, and will be a central issue, and the states are going to have to decide whether we bring in GST or not.
Well, fine. I mean, if we conclude with, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, no, not really. I think it's a great honour. A great honour being the Chief Minister. It is a lot of work. not every day is 14 hours, that would be a complete lie. But there isn't a single day where you don't look at your emails at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and think you've got to do something. There's always a day that you've got to do something. So, and again, that's fine, that's part of the job.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Bailiwick Express podcast. The title track was Shift My Weight by Luno. If you enjoyed it, I know it's a pain, but please like and share. It all helps, and remember, you can hit bailiwickexpress.com to stay right up to date with whatever is happening in the Bailiwick. You can find us online, on social, on email, and on internet radio. There'll be more from me, Matthew Leach, and all the Bailiwick Express team next Friday.